Chapter 8. Thieves, Heretics, and Whores. If this story is to be something resembling my book of deeds, we must begin at the beginning, at the heart of who I truly am. To do this, you must remember that before I was anything else, I was one of the Edema Rue. Contrary to popular belief, not all traveling performers are of the Rue. My troupe was not some poor batch of mummers japing at crossroads for pennies, singing for our suppers. We were court performers, Lord Greyfellow's men. Our arrival in most towns was more of an event than the midwinter pageantry and selenade games rolled together. There were usually at least 8 wagons in our troupe, and well over 24 performers, actors and acrobats, musicians and magicians, jugglers and jesters. My family. My father was a better actor and musician than any you have ever seen. My mother had a natural gift for words. They were both beautiful, with dark hair and easy laughter. They were rude down to their bones, and that really is all that needs to be said. Save perhaps that my mother was a noble before she was a trooper. She told me my father had lured her away from a miserable, dreary hell, with sweet music and sweeter words. I could only assume she meant 3 Crossings, where we went to visit relatives when I was very young. Once. My parents were never really married, by which I mean they never bothered making their relationship official with any church. I'm not embarrassed by the fact. They considered themselves married and didn't see much point in announcing it to any government or God. I respect that. In truth, they seemed more content and faithful than many officially married couples I have seen since. Our patron was Baron Greyfellow, and his name opened many doors that would ordinarily be closed to the Edema Rue. In return, we wore his colors, green and gray, and added to his reputation wherever we went. Once a year we spent 2 span at his manor, entertaining him and his household. It was a happy childhood, growing up at the center of an endless fair. My father would read to me from the great monologues during long wagon rides between towns. Reciting mostly from memory, his voice would roll down the road for a quarter mile. I remember reading along, coming in on the secondary parts. My father would encourage me to try particularly good sections myself, and I learned to love the feel of good words. My mother and I would make up songs together. Other times my parents would act out romantic dialogues while I followed along in the books. They seemed like games at the time. Little did I know how cunningly I was being taught. I was a curious child, quick with questions and eager to learn. With acrobats and actors as my teachers, it is little wonder that I never grew to dread lessons as most children do. The roads were safer in those days, but cautious folk would still travel with our troop for safety's sake. They supplemented my education. I learned an eclectic smattering of Commonwealth law from a traveling barrister, too drunk or too pompous to realize he was lecturing an 8-year-old. I learned woodcraft from a huntsman named Lackflith, who traveled with us for nearly a whole season. I learned the sordid inner workings of the royal court in Modeg from a courtesan. As my father used to say, call a jack, call a spade, but always call a whore a lady. Their lives are hard enough, and it never hurts to be polite. Hetera smelled vaguely of cinnamon, and at 9 years old I found her fascinating without exactly knowing why. She taught me I should never do anything in private that I didn't want talked about in public, and cautioned me not to talk in my sleep. And then there was Abinthy, my first real teacher. He taught me more than all the others set end to end. If not for him, I would never have become the man I am today. I ask that you not hold it against him. He meant well. You'll have to move along, the mayor said. Camp outside town, and no one will bother you so long as you don't start any fights or wander off with anything that isn't yours. He gave my father a significant look. Then be on your merry way tomorrow. No performances. They're more trouble than they're worth. We are licensed, my father said, pulling out a folded piece of parchment from the inner pocket of his jacket. Charged to perform, in fact. The mayor shook his head and made no motion to look at our writ of patronage. It makes folks rowdy, he said firmly. Last time there was an unholy row during the play. Too much drinking, too much excitement. Folks tore the doors off the public house and smashed up the tables. The hall belongs to the town, you see. The town bears the expense of the repairs. By this time our wagons were drawing attention. Trip was doing some juggling. Marion and his wife were putting on an impromptu string puppet show. I was watching my father from the back of our wagon. "We certainly would not want to offend you or your patron," the mayor said. "However, the town can ill afford another evening such as that. As a gesture of goodwill, I'm willing to offer you a copper each, say 20 pennies, simply to be on your way and not make any trouble for us here." Now, you have to understand that 20 pennies might be a good bit of money for some little ragamuffin troupe living hand to mouth. But for us, it was simply insulting. He should have offered us 40 to play for the evening, free use of the public hall, a good meal, and beds at the inn. The last we would graciously decline, as their beds were no doubt lousy, and those in our wagon were not. If my father was surprised or insulted, he did not show it. "Pack up," he shouted over one shoulder. Trip tugged his juggling stones into various pockets without so much as a flourish. There was a disappointed chorus from several dozen townsfolk as the puppets stopped mid-jape and were packed away. The mayor looked relieved, brought out his purse, and pulled out 2 silver pennies. "I'll be sure to tell the baron of your generosity," my father said carefully, as the mayor laid the pennies into his hand. The mayor froze mid-motion. "Baron?" "Baron Greyfellow." My father paused, looking for some spark of recognition on the mayor's face. "Lord of the Eastern Marshes, Hum-Dum Brand by Theron, and the Widecont Hills." My father looked around at the horizon. "We are still in the Widecont Hills, aren't we?" "Well, yes," the mayor said, "but Squire Semmelin—" "Oh, we're in Semmelin's fief!" my father exclaimed, looking around as if just now getting his bearings. "Then, gentlemen, tidy little beard?" He brushed his chin with his fingers. The mayor nodded numbly. "Charming fellow, lovely singing voice. Met him when we were entertaining the baron last midwinter." "Of course." The mayor paused significantly. "Might I see your writ?" I watched as the mayor read it. It took him a little while, as my father had not bothered to mention the majority of the baron's titles, such as the Viscount of Montron and Lord of Trelliston. The upshot was this. It was true that the Squire Semmelin controlled this little town and all the land around it, but Semmelin owed fealty directly to Greyfellow. In more concrete terms, Greyfellow was captain of the ship. Semmelin scrubbed the planking and saluted him. The mayor refolded the parchment and handed it back to my father. "I see." That was all. I remember being stunned when the mayor didn't apologize or offer my father more money. My father paused as well, then continued. "The city is your jurisdiction, sir, but we'll perform either way. It will either be here or just outside the city limits." "You can't use the public house," the mayor said firmly. "I won't have it wrecked again." "We can play right here." My father pointed to the market square. "It will be enough space, and it keeps everyone right here in town." The mayor hesitated, though I could hardly believe it. We sometimes chose to play on the green because the local buildings weren't big enough. 2 of our wagons were built to become staged for just that eventuality. But in my whole 11 years of memory, I could barely count on both hands the times we'd been forced to play the green. We had never played outside the city limits. But we were spared that. The mayor nodded at last and gestured my father closer. I slipped out the back of the wagon and moved close enough to catch the end of what he said. "God-fearing folk around here. Nothing vulgar or heretical. We had a double handful of trouble with the last troop that came through here. 2 fights, folks missing their laundry, and one of Branston's daughters got herself in a family way." I was outraged. I waited for my father to show the mayor the sharp side of his tongue, to explain the difference between mere traveling performers and a demaroo. We didn't steal. We would never let things get so out of control that a bunch of drunks ruined the hall where we were playing. But my father did nothing of the sort. He just nodded and walked back toward our wagon. He gestured and Trip started juggling again. The puppets re-emerged from their cases. As he came around the wagon, he saw me standing, half hidden beside the horses. "I'm guessing you heard the whole thing from the look on your face," he said with a wry grin. "Let it go, my boy. He gets full marks for honesty, if not for grace. He just says out loud what other folk keep in the quiet of their hearts. Why do you think I have everyone stand pays when we go about our business in bigger towns?" I knew it was the truth. Still, it was a hard pill for a young boy to swallow. 20 pennies, I said scathingly, as if he were offering us charity. That was the hardest part of growing up in Demaroo. We are strangers everywhere. Many folk view us as vagabonds and beggars, while others deem us little more than thieves, heretics, and whores. It's hard to be wrongfully accused, but it's worse when the people looking down on you are clods who have never read a book or traveled more than 20 miles from the place where they were born. My father laughed and ruffed my hair. "Just pity him, my boy. Tomorrow we'll be on our way, but he'll have to keep his own disagreeable company until the day he dies." "He's an ignorant blatherskate," I said bitterly. He lay a firm hand on my shoulder, letting me know I'd said enough. This is what comes of getting too close to a tour, I suppose. Tomorrow we'll head south. Greener pastures, kinder folk, prettier women.